Hello, this is Dennis.
And this is Jay, and we're from Podcast Stardust.
You're listening to the Rebel Base Card Podcast.
Great pull, kid.
I came with you to be part of something. If it goes up in flames, it will burn very brightly.
You've seen the show, and like us, you have questions.
Ooh, that was a good one, but try this one on for size.
No question should be left off your list.
Whoa, I got a crazy theory, but hear me out.
But you better have some spares.
Oh, that was one of mine. All right, let's do this instead.
With me, as always, is my friend and Card Squadron winger.
This is Greg Cass, a.k.a. Ion Cannon.
We've recorded at home and across the U.S.
Last summer, we were from the Boston Common. This week, we're in Chicago.
This is day 3 of celebration.
The show has had many names, but the purpose is the same. Let's share some time at the table.
Ding ding, it's time for breakfast.
Welcome to the Breakfast Pack, a Rebel Base Card micro podcast series. A returning Rebel Base Card podcast series that asks more questions than it answers. Today on Breakfast Pack number 100, it's the return of questions and or breakfast. In this episode, we are asking questions and making comments on the first arc of Andor Season 2, 1 year later, Sagrona Teema and Harvest, which debuted on Disney Plus on the same night, April 22nd, and that was on a Tuesday. With me, returning for an unbelievable 100th episode of this, I guess not so limited series of the Rebel Base Card podcast, is my co-host and Card Squadron winger, Gregory Cass. But before I bring you on, I just have to say this. I tend not to be the type that gets into anniversaries or big numbers for the podcast, but this one is pretty special. When I first pitched the idea to him years back to do the first season of The Bad Batch, I had no idea that we would still be doing this. Along the way, we've done shows from Celebration Anaheim, from Boston, with the audience of a pigeon, mind you, and Chicago, where we had Jen and some other folks along. And we're back for this final season of Andor, and wow, just wow. So, Greg, I want to thank you. And to all who have come on and helped us out, try something a little different. It's been a blast. Gregory Cass from ioncannon.com, Sagrona Teema.
So unexpected and so wonderful. I mean, it is something unpredictable, but in the end, it's right. I hope you've had the time of your life. Really heartfelt. I mean, consuming all this Star Wars media is something I would be doing anyway, and I'd be burning up every text message thread I am a part of. But it's so nice to have this standard conversation. And while it is a celebration of the show, and it is a celebration of my friendship to you, my very dear friend, when we go through dry spells, we don't talk to each other as much, and it gets weird and strange because I miss you. So it's really great to celebrate that. And I also want to, of course, celebrate our regulars who make this show really, really fun to do. So many on our message threads, and so many who reach out on Instagram or other venues. Really, really heartfelt thanks. I love podcasting, this show and my other shows, but it can feel like talking into the void. And so the fact that every once in a while somebody reaches out of the void and just says like, hey, that was a funny joke, or here's my question, really means a lot. I'm not going to name names because then I will inevitably leave somebody out and forget somebody who has done a really special job. But if you have interacted with us, if you've listened to us, if you have like thrown down your AirPods in frustration at some point over the last 100 episodes, thank you a million times. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And by the way, having worked at Apple, please don't throw your AirPods on the floor because they are expensive to replace, and it's an awkward discussion with the genius when you're doing that. So, at anyway, but this has been a blast. You've been here for nearly every one, and we've
not
had
as many as you, but almost.
But we've had a ton of people, and like I said, it makes it fun because I think that as the podcast has gone along and something like this, it kind of brings in a little different audience, and sometimes they might want to stick around for some collecting and card talk. But at the end of the day, like most Star Wars fans collect stuff, and most people who collect stuff like watching Star Wars. So it kind of is a nice symbiosis, and it is kind of a nice way to break things up. And this is a crazy way of debuting this series, which we're going to get into in a minute. But it's kind of fun to be back and to see when seasons come back around again and we get to like we've done a number of like new shows, but it's nice when it comes back, like we did with the Bad Batch, to kind of go, oh, all right, here's a returning one, and you're already kind of in a nice groove. However, if you're joining us for the first time on the Breakfast Pack, and we name the names of the shows a little different. So this one is Questions and/or Breakfast, but it's all loosely titled under the Breakfast Pack. So it's an insert series in the regular feed where Greg and I and occasionally guests will trade questions and comments on the latest episodes of Star Wars TV. Now, since we're talking about a brand new season of a series, I want to remind anyone that there's going to be spoilers. And if you haven't seen this or finished the entire first arc of Andor, and I want to stress that, we'll get into that in a moment, I want you to come back and please, listen after you've watched all 3 of those first episodes, because that way there are spoilers. And anyway, so for the contest of questions, there's no points, bonuses, or lightning rounds, but we are going to start next episode, whenever we record that, because this is a crazy recording schedule. We usually talk about something called the Greg's List. Now, these are a selection of podcasts and other assorted media. You talked about the HoloNet Marauders. We always love to promote our fellow podcasters and what they are doing. So we're hoping that you find, if you haven't checked out some of these folks, definitely check them out. It's one of my favorite aspects of the podcast, where we get to talk about, who's doing some writing, who's doing some video podcasts, who's doing some audio podcasts. Maybe you'll find that there's a creator out there that you like, and you find and follow and help support someone new. And anyway, but yeah, we'll start that the next one, because we're kind of like coming off of Celebration right into Andor. It's a nutty time. We've got May the 4th around the corner. We've got a special show for May the 4th as well. But at any rate, once we run through our list of questions and comments, at the end, and it's good I put this now here so I remember it, 100 episodes, I finally remember to kind of put this tagline in. We are going to give our Pringles can review of the show or arc. I'm going to leave it up to my co-host to help figure out whether we're going to rate individual episodes, or are we going to do the arc, and maybe later on this summer we'll come back and do individual episodes. This is a great segue for you, Greg. What do you think? How should we do our Pringles can review starting with a second season of Andor?
First of all, I can't go any further without dropping in my catchphrase, or else Daz will be mad at me. So ding ding, it's breakfast time, and it's not greasy spoon sizzler breakfast. We've got high-end fancy hotel breakfast today. I think we should rate the arcs. So I think everybody's struggling a little bit to figure out how they're going to cover this, because this is a lot. And so Greg and I's initial thought, and we will see if we deliver on this, is that we're going to try to rush and keep up with each of the arcs for the next 4 weeks, this being number 1 of 4. And then we might take a little time and slow down and kind of savor it this summer, maybe breaking away from our question format, because it doesn't necessarily make sense once you've seen it all as much. But we'll think of something to do, and are open to suggestions for the part of it. So in the spirit of that, I will say let us rate the arc at the end of the episode with up to 10 Pringles cans to determine whether this is a success or not.
Excellent. I agree, and I think that's a way to do it, because it's funny, even in the rewatches of some of these, right? Because typically you'd go back and watch, at least in the beginning, a lot of times I would watch the episode 2, 3, 4 times, and especially if there was only one episode and we had maybe a little bit of time in between, and here before we're usually like complaining that the stories don't go in an hour. 1 and 3 were definitely longer, and so it was tough to go back, and you felt like I wasn't watching episode 2 enough. And so even today, I was kind of like laid up, as you could probably hear, I've got a little bit of a cold. But, watching 1, I watched it a lot. I watched episode 3 a number of times. I don't think I watched 2 as much as I wanted to, but it made it kind of tough, because then you feel like you're going to miss something. So I like being able to rate them as an arc and then go back.
I just want to say I completely agree. And I feel like the 3 episodes on one night, there's going to be that natural lull where it's like, okay, we're into the new year. We got to figure out what's going on, where everybody's at. That makes the first episode really exciting. And then the second ends up naturally feeling like a little bit of filler, sight unseen, until you get the big bang of the third episode. So I think that's going to be a feeling that continues, but we got to fight it. It really feels to me like I sat down and watched a cool Star Wars movie, and I don't necessarily feel those demarcations, especially. Well, I noticed today on my rewatch that the wonderful couple in one plot line prepares for their big meal in one episode, and nothing actually happens till the next episode. So it's kind of, the way they're edited, it feels a lot like last season. I think they were expecting this to be week to week, but I think they make a lot of sense kind of grouped in these bigger arcs.
Well, and I also feel that, when you see the parallels, as we'll kind of talk about in a little bit, between, let's just say Team Cassian and Team Mon, it really hits home. I mean, you don't have to kind of sit there after the first 3 episodes or, let's say if we were doing it week to week, and then you kind of go back and go, wow, I really see this. And so it's a little easier to kind of put those blocks together and see what they were doing, considering that these were also a year. But something that, like, even as I was putting in my review for Fantatrax in the pool, it would have been interesting now going back, after having watched those first 3, going, would it have been so hard to throw a couple more episodes in and and then you could have done, let's say, 18 to 24, and then your commitments to your actors are done. You could have milked this for so much longer. It would have been interesting because I think there's so much there, without going like into full rant mode yet. But it was one of those things where you're like, wow, it would have been really cool for these arcs to have a little more in there, even if they would have been called filler. I think it would have been kind of fun because I just think we want to be around these characters and we want to see their arcs, and I think they're delivering on all notes as far as showing us the people that we were expecting, we were hoping, and they're just, it seems like it's like an all-star lineup where you're just going, oh man, and everybody's just, it's all 10s.
I mean, I didn't go with this question, but I thought of asking you at one point, like, is there a flaw in these episodes? Like, you may not like what they deliver, but they are doing exactly what they want to do. And it's constructed so kind of meticulously that I feel like there's so much strength there. So, yeah, to your point, and we can transition to the episode after this, but I would just say we've talked before about the economics of streaming changing dramatically. And that really happened between these 2 seasons.
Yes.
And this is not a full Greg's List recommendation, but there's a podcast on the Ringer Network called The Watch, and they host, they do prestige TV. So they're year round and they just jump show to show to show. But for their premiere episode about Andor's first 3, they got Tony Gilroy to come on, and they made the very smart decision of asking him to only talk about these 3. So you can listen to all the interview and he goes through the beats of these 3 episodes. I think they're planning to have him back at the end of the season to talk about the full arc. But one of the things Tony Gilroy alluded to a few times is that there were rewrites based on what he called economics. And I think that's the big bosses saying, you can't have that budget. Now, this show looks so expensive. It's all on the screen. The costumes, the scenery, everything looks so incredible. I can imagine that Disney ended up really liking this plan for like a nice 12 episode prestige, wrap it up, get out before you overstay your welcome. So I think this is the only way season 2 would have happened, in other words. But it sounds like from what Tony Gilroy has said in the press that Kathleen has been a big ally, Kathleen Kennedy, sorry, I don't know her, I shouldn't be that familiar, and that Bob Iger just understood this is the prestige Star Wars play and he supports it and likes the show and thinks it's, one of those shows that will stand the test of time even if the ratings aren't as good as Ahsoka or Skeleton Crew.
One thing that's nice coming off the heels of Celebration and getting that reaffirmation that we are seeing more television and the movie announcements and things like that. So we will not be without Star Wars. But you're right. When a show gets greenlit or when it goes into its subsequent seasons, there's a big gap of time and things can happen overnight. I do recommend, like I said, we're not necessarily doing a Greg's List, but we're doing a Greg's List because I also want to add in, if you are looking for a nice streaming TV show, I would recommend Downstream from Relay FM. Jason Snell, who normally you would find talking about like Mac and tech, he was he was a writer and editor for Macworld magazine pretty much through its run from like the 90s up until when Macworld the magazine kind of ended its reign. But he is my go-to for Apple News, but he really does a great job with Downstream because he talks to other like TV journalists and so forth, and they talk a lot about not just Disney Plus type streaming shows, but they'll talk about the industry as well. And it's really a nice way to kind of get a gauge of what's happening out there, not just with, sports rights and TV, but with all these other networks and how Max, and all this kind of stuff. And so it's a nice way to kind of like round out your podcast breakfast, as it were, because, a lot of this stuff, a lot of these external factors are influencing the way that we are enjoying Star Wars. It's just the nature of the beast. And it would, like I said, yes, you could say it was so much different if it was just George and Lucasfilm and they were doing it whatever they want. But at the same time, it's like, it's expensive to do this kind of stuff. Lucasfilm could make movies, it's like George had a real head for business, but at some point, these, just like with Apple, it kind of moves from the basement, from the garage business to a corporate business, and you've got a lot of people and shareholders and things like that, as well as fans. But at any rate, so we know that we're going to get more. I wish we could get more from Andor, but what we're getting so far, to kind of like just to talk about what you said, is amazing, and it starts with that first scene. Which I don't know if your first question is going to go there. All I have to say is for the first piece that you see, that set piece with the TIE Avenger, absolutely stunning. Even if we don't talk about too much other than that, that first scene really was a great hook in that first sequence. So yeah, I see a lot of money that was spent right there, a lot of money that was well spent. I have almost nothing bad to say about it. And if I was just giving a Pringles can to that opening scene, that would be a 10. That's it, just everything.
Yes, and Gilroy talked in that interview, and I will try not to spoil that whole interview since I recommended it to people because it's really good. Go read it, or listen to it. But he talked about how one of the things that was said about them last year was that they started too slow, right? And that was kind of, we had talked at the time, or sorry, 2 years ago, however long ago, 15 years ago, it feels like. But that the opening arc, it was 3 episodes the first night of Andor season 1 as well, you may recall. 2 or 3? It was 3, I think. 2?
I thought it might be 2, but you're what, right? I could probably be 3. I don't remember now. Think about it.
I think it's 3 because the Ferrix opening arc is 4 long, but I may have that wrong.
Wow.
I'll look it up next time you're talking. I will say, this started with a bang. It was like, oh, you think we're a slow show? We're not a slow show anymore, right? We're doing this with good speed and good action, and was really, really well done. But it also made it clear that this is still Andor. That opening discussion between Cassian and this seemingly rebel spy, or this defector from the Sinar flight systems, she was incredible, right? And that scene about like, I'm gonna welcome you home, or welcome home to this, I believe that was Naya asking, if I die tonight, was it worth it, and so on. It was like, oh, this is still the meaty character piece you're expecting Andor to be. We're just also going to throw in a pretty kick-butt TIE chase into the opening of it.
Oh, actually, and as you were talking, I went back into my notes, and yes, your memory is correct. It did start off Wednesday, September 21st. They had 3 episodes. Wow.
Which year? Is that 22?
This is September 23rd. I wrote this to September 23rd. 2022. So September 21st, it dropped with 3, because I remember the trailer came out while we were in Celebration Anaheim, and then because at that point, oh wow, right, because at that point in Celebration, it was Kenobi. So the first, you guys saw what, 2 episodes of Kenobi, or you saw the first one?
2 episodes of Kenobi, and that was. But I remember that Lucasfilm panel where it was mainly to promote Kenobi, and they told us we'd get to come to the world premiere that night, but they really showed the first footage of Andor, and I will never forget Jen and I sitting in there on either side of a kind of what we would lovingly call on the long take review a normie who respects Star Wars but doesn't obsess over it. And like the time grappler starts, and Jen and I just go like, "Oh, like what is this? Like this looks so good." And I think both of us were sold on the show from that moment. And her normie friend was like, "It looks fine, calm down," but we experienced something closer to ecstasy. So yeah, it's crazy to me that it has been a full 3 years since that was on. I feel like time is slipping away from me, but it's so great that my expectations could be through the roof. And within that first scene, I'm like, I'm not worried. Like, we're back, baby. We're so back.
All right. So since we are back, I am kind of curious where your first line of questioning is going to go.
I'm just going to, in passing note, because in my Canon Connections section, I don't want to neglect that you already checked the TIE Avenger, which originated in the TIE Fighter video game from the 90s.
Wow.
How great is that they pulled from one of those were classics of my childhood. I played those games a lot. I was terrible at them. So I maybe never even got far enough to see the TIE Avenger, but the fact they pulled from that video game made me very happy. And also, the company Sinar, as the creators of the TIE Fighters, has been in canon probably since the West End video games, and so to actually get to see them and to see a test facility is super cool as well. If there's an Andor detractor out there, I think you sometimes hear that it's its own thing and it's not connected into Star Wars, but I'll call bullpucky on those claims because this is so connected in. My questions, as I said earlier today to you, might have all just been like, how awesome was this, right? Do you remember the Chris Farley talk show on SNL where the actor would come on and he'd be like, "Do you remember when you played this role? That was great." And that's what my Andor questions could be. I'm so in the bag. But my first question, I'm going to skip the Sinar stuff, and I want to talk about the Malphine conference going on.
We're going there
because this is a first episode only plot line. The ramifications happen in 2 or 3, but it's my first question because that was the first time I really sat up straight and was like, we got some heavy stuff going on. So the very deep question I ask is, what did you make of this conference? What was your reaction to it? Because I found it to be deeply fascinating, and I want to hear kind of how you would explain it or how you would summarize it.
I think the fact that the very opening titles, when you get the Mathene divide and you go, all right, we've added extra words around this location. We already know it's going to be good. The one thing I would have to say is, welcome back Ben Mendelsohn. Woo! And boy, does he chew through scenery. You're just Beautiful. Like every word. I'm like, this is what made, Secret Invasion. This is what made it worth it to kind of go through. It's like, as much as I did not like that Marvel Disney Plus series, I loved watching Ben Mendelsohn in it. So I could pretty much put up with him no matter what. But I would say that I love seeing the variety of it. It's like when he's talking about this is the tightest of circles, and you're just like, yes. And I started writing down things like the Imperial PowerPoint, because the whole Gorman video of like this, something that comes out of like the 50s, and someone who watches a lot of MST3K, and you're going, oh man, where are the robots? Because I just want to see them like go through. But what was so interesting about this was the fact, and I wrote this down, in notes, as far as like how much we're like 4 years BBY, and the Emperor is still keeping a relatively, like mild hand on these systems. As far as like, there's only, you're sitting there thinking, I'm like, of course it's terrible to say like, there's only 800,000, you can move them. But it's like, he does not, like, he understands, it's interesting, like he understands where his power is, but that still that the illusion of that the Senate is working and all this kind of stuff. And I know that there was some Gorman stuff. I remember Mothma talking about, like, in the early season of Andor, talking about the Gorman initiative or something along those lines. But I was just really surprised how delicate the situation was and all that, as I'm starting to lose my voice. But I just really loved it. And of course, you get Deidre Mira there. You've got Major Partagas there. And so it's just, you can really see, to me, I can see that this probably runs through all the arcs. Because there's something going to be super bad happen to Gorman. I really hate to break it to folks. I'm like, if you want to talk about the Deadpool, this is a pretty big Deadpool. Because we also saw that in the first episode of Andor, when you saw like whatever that big mining disaster was that was on Canary.
Yep.
This is what you're probably going to see.
Came to mind. Yeah, exactly. I thought of that too. Absolutely.
But yeah, I absolutely loved it. I could go on and on and on, just like you said, just like Chris Farley. But I'm curious your thoughts.
This scene was incredible to me, and that's why I wanted to bring it up. It is such a good example of how this show can show you something totally new in Star Wars, and yet it doesn't feel out of place. It is an extension of what has existed before, and it shows you this. There is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, and I want to be sensitive about real-world comparisons because real-world tragedies are more important than Star Wars. But there's a phrase called the banality of evil, right? And I thought that is what this scene was. This is the fact that something like the awful real-world tragedies such as the Holocaust often come down to a bunch of guys in a conference room making the plan. And it's a awful thing, but it shows you how cold and unfeeling it is and just how lame it is. People who saw Oppenheimer, there's a great scene in Oppenheimer where they're debating where they're going to drop the bomb, speaking of atrocities, right? And one guy just is like, well, don't drop it on Kyoto because that's where my wife and I did our honeymoon and I really like that city. And you're like, what? Like millions of people just were condemned to death because that one guy had a fond memory of a city. And it's incredible to think about that level of atrocity. And that's what we're seeing here. And it's all so stupid and yet so incredible that it's there. The imagery of the Malthine Divide and that window, I will say what came to mind to me was the first Captain America movie. Red Skull has a lair that looks very much like that, which I believe is modeled after an actual Nazi fortress that was built inside of a mountain in the Alps. I don't have all the expertise on World War II history. So I thought they were purposefully invoking that kind of fascist regime deliberately. And I watch my Indiana Jones. I want to punch Nazis, so I'm all for kind of making these villains there. The Gormans, as you noted, have been dropped in throughout season 1, and this also is a major part of the Mon Mothma episodes in a late season of Rebels. Which is worth mentioning, another canon connection, because the guy who comes up to her and says the governor has taken 2 parking spots, he's also in that episode of Rebels. So they pulled him over and did a nice job. But I think, Gorman, the Gorman set piece is clearly going to be a central part of this. I can't tell if it'll be the middle arc, kind of in where Aldhani was last season, or if this will be the big Ferrex finale. I kind of would put my money on Aldhani, that kind of mid-episode event, and then the finale will be something different. But very, very excited about this. Mendelsohn just earns every second. I think Most Things Kenobi on Instagram posted a clip of him kind of flipping his wrist and shooting his cape, and they said, like, where was this diva in Rogue One? I love it. And absolutely, and he's so good. Devotees of the program know my good friend Ben goes by Director Bennick, and I just I texted him because I was like, I didn't know if he would be great coming back, and I should have never doubted it. And Ben admitted that he also had misgivings about, do we build more on this? Can it fall flat? And just completely agreed. He delivered. So if the biggest Director Krennic fan I know is satisfied, then I'm satisfied. And it all just is so insidiously, awfully evil. It was wonderful. And oh God, now I could just go on. Krennic mentoring Miro, that's just genius. Who thought of that? Like how putting those two together, that seems incredible, and I can't wait to see where that goes. The one criticism I've heard of this season from the people who got to watch it all is that you miss the years in between. because to your point from before, we love these characters so much. We want to see every moment. So it's going to be hard to jump a year into that relationship and see what it looks like. Cause I want the spin-off series day by day.
Well, not just that. It's like, when we go back and like maybe like normal people watch this maybe an episode at a time, will that 3 to 4 and these in-betweens, will they mean as much when we go back and see them subsequent times, or just it's funny because when you see these for the first time, I think a lot of it maybe sculpts how your impression of the series, as opposed to if we were only talking about that first episode for the entire week and we go through. It's fascinating. It'll be fascinating to kind of look back once this is done. But I want to stay on this meeting as well, because there was a bulk of my questions that were coming from this as well, and I'm glad you didn't necessarily cover this and steal one. As we know from Breakfast Pack, we can steal each other's questions because we don't talk about them in advance. But I am curious, do you think Krennic has the Emperor's ear as much as he boasts about it, knowing what you know from Rogue One?
I mean, I think the answer has to be no, knowing what I know from Rogue One, right? I mean, sorry, I keep confusing him with Krennic is, and shout out to director Bennick who gave us his notes again, because I've already referenced them like 4 times incredible in this talk. But Krennic the beauty of Krennic is he's a middle manager, right? He's striving for that upper tier. The phrase from Hamilton, which is actually stolen from West Wing, is "I want to be in the room where it happens." Krennic wants to be in the room. And so I actually would call into question how much of what he describes about this room is that important, right? Like, on my first watch, I believed every word he said. On my second watch, I was like, is he just inflating this so he sounds more important and he, gets there? What is his cape except Cyril's piping on his uniform, right? Like, it's the same spirit, I feel like, that motivates him. And so I think he might be inflating his own importance a little bit. Relatedly, because you mentioned Rogue One, if people love Krennic and people love Rogue One, the novel Catalyst, which is the prequel novel, is an incredible lead-in to Rogue One, and it's specifically about Krennic and Galen Erso. It's not about Jyn. It's that group. And one of the things they talk about is that the Death Star project is presented, and Galen is fooled for a long time into believing it is about energy independence, which gets name-checked here, that is the lie used to sell that technology. So again, I love you, my dear book friends, but when you say like, wow, Disney ignores everything and doesn't, but they weave in as much as they can and they make changes when they need to, but they did a great job kind of respecting canon on this regard and enriching it. So I think I've already planned out when Andor's done, we're weeping at the finale. I'm going right to pick up Catalyst to read that last chunk, and then I'm watching Rogue One because it all fits together well. So, but that's a little aside from the question. I think Krennic is not having the Emperor's ear. I think he maybe knows how to contact somebody who will tell the Emperor something, maybe.
Agreed. I agreed. I think, like Cyril's discussion with the new hire, there's a future here for those who dare. I just about cried, actually, when I saw that scene, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I do also think that knowing with Rogue One, and it does kind of make sense, even if you had, it's one of those where you're like, So, yeah, this room might be, the Bureau of Standards, higher Imperial rank edition, where it's like, he was, of course, told by it's like, hey, you've got to prepare this. But he's kind of like expanding upon this. And I would say to a certain extent, Partagas is kind of caught up in it as well, in his own sort of way, where he's trying to tell, Deidre, like, take Gorman and win it. This is a gift. And you're like, maybe he might be able to call BS on Krennic a little bit, but he does understand how the system works. And regardless, you have to have the initiative. You have to take the initiative, because that's how you get ahead in this Imperial system that's been around for a little bit now. So at any rate, but yeah, I think he's talking a good game.
I want to offer one counterpoint if somebody wants to fight this with us. And it's a set design point. So there's the big window on one side that becomes the screen. On the other end of the room, there is, I believe the art term is called a frieze, right? A sculpture that's kind of embedded in the wall. And I can't tell the full details of it, but it is an intricate carving of some kind of battle, it appears to be. And why that was on my mind is, I don't know, some weirdo might have seen Revenge of the Sith 5 times in the last 3 days. And those are heavily featured in Palpatine's office. So I can't imagine a version of this that is like, this is presumably one of Palpatine's hideaways. And if he senses a threat, he would go to this bunker, just like Hitler went to his bunker, and hole up and try to regroup. And so if this is really Palpatine's kind of hideaway, then I think Palpatine would at least have to endorse what's going on here, if not, push for it.
Oh, and Palpatine knows, and I'm sure that even though all the droids get their memories wiped and things like that, Palpatine's going to know what's happened here, what's going on here. He's going to know the names before anybody else. So, as we know, he's the ultimate gamester at this one. All right, good question. All right, what's your next one?
I'm going to just be jumping around all the plot lines. I'm not staying in one too long, even though I could do like hours on any single one of these, particularly the wedding. So my second question is, knowing your, feelings about season 1, did the Pai Mei rebels replace Tim as most frustrating characters on this show?
Oh God. Yeah, I had sporadic, not very nice things to say. Once again, in my review for Fantatrax, I left out most of this because I could have really harped on the 4 dullards of the apocalypse. No, apparently rebellions are built on a reliable food source. I also had The Last of Us Rebels edition. It was really amazing. So to go into, I think, what I did write about, I did say that it does show you, if you really want to go with the high road on this, the moral high road on this was, it does go to show you that the rebellion needs a lot of folks and takes a lot of folks, and a lot of folks have to come from, like, for example, our recruit, right? Which she's so Kia, is it Kia? Nia?
Naya.
Naya.
Yeah.
She is so symbolic of how this journey begins, where it begins like it's like Nemex's manifesto of how you go through. But at the end, it's like just what happened with Nemex. It's very sloppy. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of tension, and it doesn't take much to really throw things out of whack. And, if you are not as, just look at the juxtaposition of, Andor there, who's very seasoned at this point, even before he would have found his way out of this thing before he joined the rebellion. He already had the tools. But some of these folks, these are just normal folks like you and me, right? It's like us going into Smuggler's Run. We think we know how we're like, we got this. And I have to tell you, as the engineer, I did not do a great job on Smuggler's Run. And I was like, I was as hyped for it. Like, I'm just going to say I'm not the pilot. But it does, I think, to take the high road, it does show you, they'll take anybody, and it's very sloppy. If you think about, like, going back to what Andor season 1, Krieger and those guys that were lost, right? That may have been some of this as well. And so there is only the strongest survive on both sides, and it takes quite a lot. But yeah, they were incredibly trying because we're getting to Luke and Han, but there's a lot of other folks there along the way. And I liked it because I think Gilroy, it's very sloppy, it's very ugly, it's not clean. I love the little bit of Andor just patiently getting water from dripping water. He knows exactly how to survive, and he's telling them, like, I think you guys better put a perimeter. I think you guys better get a tarp. And they're all like, yeah, I would have thought of that. And you're just like, oh man. Good looking, but very dumb rebels. But at any rate, that's as kind as I'm going to be to them.
Well, yes, and that's all they deserve. Just, I would say that plot line was incredibly frustrating, and I say that not as a criticism. Like they wanted it to be frustrating, and it is really, I think, important to show that social movements don't move in a straight line. They progress and they regress. And I think I hadn't thought about it the way you just said, but to really pinpoint, we see what a good leader does in Cassian in that opening scene. And we don't meet Pai Mei here. I suspect we might later, after the big reveal of what planet we're on here. But I do suspect that what we're seeing is what bad leadership does, right? Doesn't communicate, doesn't keep their people in line, doesn't get everybody on the same team. Luthen is not flawless, but he's effective. Pai Mei seems ineffective. And I'm really excited to kind of meet that character and get a little more depth there. But yeah, these guys are just a bunch of idiots, right? And saying this with all due love and admiration, like they strike me as, 18-year-olds that, have the ideals, but not the sense. And their ideals lead them to the rebellion, and that's admirable. But you also need to follow that up with sense. And, principles are not the same. I will just throw in a couple wonderful details. So the StarWars.com behind the scenes guide points out Tony Gilroy wasn't sure exactly how to write this scene. And then he had dinner with his son and his, I believe, his niece's husband. So like a nephew-in-law, I guess that would be. And was basically so frustrated by how inane and how rudely they treated each other that he wrote these scenes and then cast those two. So they are the leaders of the two factions who get a lot of prominent time, are his family members, which is just so great. I always tell my students, write what you know, write from your experience, and that's what Tony Gilroy is doing. So that's really great. I also love that we now have Star Wars rock, paper, scissors. And
Yes.
I want the full rules written up on StarWars.com. I don't know if that's a Kelly Knox job or a Kristen Baver or maybe a Dan Z job, but to explore what those rules are and map it out, I really want to see as well. But these guys are dumb, but I'm glad the rebellion has some dummies in it, because it can't just all be Luke Skywalkers and Han Solos, as you said. You need some people who aren't going to make it out of the trenches too.
Speaking of Dan Z, I'm sure if there were full rules for this, Mason Z would completely kill me at this, because he's already good at Sabacc. At any rate, yeah, it's also, I was sitting there. Going back to Rebels, right? And where a lot of those beginning seasons of Rebels, you're waiting for these cells to start to kind of get together. I think it's really interesting to see the cells, rubbing up against each other, but they can't talk to each other. And so it does also kind of give you an idea of like how much the rebellion lost just getting up to the point, of where you see like the Rebel fleet and all this kind of stuff. And, by the time you get to Empire Strikes Back, right, they're kind of a fully functioning force, and they've got all this stuff, and there's a chain of command and all this. Here it's just cells, and most of them are on a need to know basis, and apparently they don't know enough. They almost don't know what they know. And yeah, it just goes poorly. It kind of reminds me of the Life of Brian scene where the Judean People's Front and the People's Front, they all meet in the sewers, and they all end up wiping each other out because they're having these disagreements, and you're just going, yeah. And then of course, the pan up once the escape happens and you see like where they are, I go, oh, just that was the chef's kiss right there. And you're going, that just made so much. That's nice.
Well, and yeah, whatever ill will I had about that plot line and being like, we spent 2 episodes here, but then you're like, oh, we'll be back. And yeah, I would love, I tried not to do speculating questions because they don't have a long shelf life, but I really do wonder if Pai Mei is already in control of those temples and has the hangars built and the infrastructure ready. Is this how the rebellion discovers the temples and then we go there? And they build it over time. I think you're right to think about Rogue One as the moment where the rebels became the Rebel Alliance. And so how do we build to that? I think that's like what an incredible log line for a show if that's what we're going to see.
Boy, also you kind of got very vibes of what Mount Tantus from Bad Batch. Hello, let's do a couple callbacks of our own about how unfriendly the surface of that planet is and what's happening around it. And you could simply do a book. There's a book that's got to happen that's going to talk about the pacification of Yavin 4, of how you take it, because like by the time that Andor gets back there, that ship, why did they destroy the ship? Oh my gosh! Now I'm going to be like, yeah. Now I think it's best to maybe leave those guys just like Cassian did, and anybody makes it when the rebellion happens. Well, okay, great. But I don't want to go back here, folks. That was bad enough. Speaking of not going back there, let's go to a completely. You could almost make iPhones in this apartment that is so clean. Deidre Miro's apartment. This is a clean room. I'm almost waiting to see IBM got like the Intel guys in the other room, and they're making chips. But we see the preparation for this amazing meal that I can't believe. I don't know how far we're in here. We're 44 minutes in, and I think I've shown great restraint of not bringing up my favorite character, Edie Karn. But the meal of Edie Karn and all this, I don't know how I can craft a really good question, because I'm going to do the Chris Farley's. Like, you remember that scene when Edie Karn comes in? Wasn't it great? But were you kind of expecting A, Cyril and Deidre to be a thing, and B, them bringing, Cyril's mother in, to this amazing meal? That it's a weak question, but I want to talk about it. I got to talk about it.
I mean, oh man. So what comes to mind more than anything else, and shout out to Mary, who monitored the live stream from Japan for us constantly and kept us updated when something good was happening. But I watched when the Andor cast hit the live stage, and the Denise Gao, who plays Miro, talked about like how they're together and it's weird. and what's so wonderful is Kyle Solar and Denise Go seem like just normal, charming, wonderful people playing these absolute weirdos, and this fascist weirdo at that. And it's so delicious, and I didn't know what to expect. The weird awkward almost kiss in the Andor finale season 1, I was really not sure, because I really didn't want Cyril to get a win. I wanted him, I thought the message of the show should be like, you want to be a fascist, you get, your teeth kicked out. You get hit with a brick. But I actually should have trusted Tony Gilroy, and this is just so good. And what comes to mind is how, season 1 gets written before you cast anybody. And this just feels like he had seen the notes each of these instruments can play so well, and was like, it's symphony time, baby. Let's just blow it out, and let's, turn it up to 11 and see what we can do. And Edie Karn is transcendently good, from asking for spiced tea just on through. Then the way we finally get her shut up just feels so incredible. And I love the I don't want to hear any more about Uncle Harlow. I've had a peek in his file. I might have this wrong. A friend asked me, I believe it was Anthony King, asked if we would get to see Uncle Harlow this season. And that's a great question. And I still think it's an open question. But it's interesting to know that Uncle Harlow is not the upstanding citizen we maybe once thought about it.
Oh my gosh.
I loved every millisecond of this. I loved that they were eating fondue. I loved Miro going through the itinerary and how it's going to be now. And I will save my one other thing I really loved, because you didn't steal a question, but you came close to one of mine. So I will say, send it back to you. I mean, as soon as it started, I'm like, Greg is gonna be so happy. So just preach, brother. What made you happy about it?
Here's the thing of like, my wife works at the airport. I usually have to pick her up, usually about the time that we record. And so the routine's probably going to be where I'll get through the first episode, have to go pick up, and then, consume the other two as much as possible. And so, it's getting near midnight because I tried to start him over so we could watch. She fell asleep because we got to get up in a few hours after that. But I would say for every ounce of sleep that I lost from that, it was completely worth it. Because one, there's such a contrast, right? So they're both, she's picking out wardrobe, and it's all like, grays, blacks, grays, against this, this pristine white background. And then of course Edie comes in and it's orange, right? It's just like this, the color choice is amazing because she is just there, inescapable. You cannot not look at this. And of course, even eating the cakes where she's just hacking through it while everybody else is, but you could see, I love Cyril. At one point, he has to excuse himself because he's just like basically in the fetal position in the bed. And Deidre knows, it's so interesting. But, there was this tit for tat moment where you're just like, oh, they're just going at it. The only thing that I'm worrying about was this the only time we're going to see her. I know I'm not going to see my beloved Sergeant Linus Mosk again in the series. That was,
you never know.
You never know. But I would say, I could see them like, all right, we kind of have to finish this little piece. This is a good piece to kind of do it. And so on the one hand, you can kind of see this is how maybe other smaller pieces will end. As we kind of like hit one character's piece really did end. But how these are going to have to go. So along the lines, we're going to have to tie up these things as a bow. I don't think there's a lot more of Cyril out there. And he just, once again, it was like watching Ben Mendelsohn, like he just chewed it up. I'm like, yeah, you are so weird. I don't know why I find your character fascinating, but I'm like, yeah, you're leaning into it. Especially when he's talking about like, I sat right at that chair. And then he snaps that kid's attention back. I'm like, oh yeah, this kind of reminds you of like when a doctor like a Matt Smith gets into like season 2 or 3, and you're seeing a doctor that's really, they're really comfortable in their character. They're comfortable how they portray it. I think all these characters are, and and you're just looking every time Deidre kind of like shuffles that jawline around, and you're like, so I think the nuances are there, and I'm also happy that we are seeing those nuances. And although the action, this is supposed to be like maybe the slowish one where it gets faster and faster, I think there is still time. There's still plenty of time within that you're getting these little character pieces, and you're just seeing like, yeah, these are just mini little victory laps around.
Well, and when you hear Tony Gilroy in interviews, a lot of people, this was particularly true on his episode with Mark Maron. Mark Maron's like essentially saying like, you wrote Michael Clayton, one of the greatest movies of all time. Why are you doing Star Wars? Right. And Tony Gilroy is always like, you cannot believe the freedom I have, and that I made 200 named characters and they're all like fully realized. Like, I think this is the stuff that really gets him going. And I think you're right that if we hadn't seen Edie this season, it would have felt disappointing. It will be sad if this is it, but this was such a delicious piece of it. Kudos to you on that wardrobe catch. I didn't even put that into place, and I think that's good. And I would reinforce that with the fact that Catherine Hunter, I think it's partially her natural skin tone, but she's got kind of a fake tan vibe going, a little extra sauce on it, so that she really looks so different than very pale skinned. And I say that with love because I'm the whitest white there is. The very pale skin of Deirdre and Cyril. So because you kind of got towards it, you alluded to my favorite moment of all time, which is Cyril laying on the bed. And who hasn't been in one of those high stress situations where you're like, I just gotta go, right? My grandparents, who I loved, always had a Christmas party every year where the whole town was invited to their house and everybody was there, and everybody wanted to talk to me and just check in, and I would like go lay on the bed just like that upstairs because I got away from everybody. I found the one with no coats in it, and I could just like not answer questions for a few minutes. I could just like breathe in the quiet and the hum of the party downstairs, and so it felt so real. So here's my question about it: is what if in the end Cyril becomes the most relatable character on this show, right? And what does that say? And I guess a part of that question is asking for a little speculation. Like, I think he has gone from Hitler Youth to somebody we care about. And what's the end of that arc that feels satisfying? Do we need him to be successful, or do we need him to burn the standard of bureaus and practices down? What's the sensible ending for Cyril?
Well, it's interesting because even from his beginnings of trying to do the right thing and being very, you know, like I've worked with folks before who, you know, they terrible as far as people person, but they, you know, people skills, but they had the right idea, and it's all about the presentation of such. And so what's funny is that, you know, he's describing waste. He's describing like, this is not right. And I spent, you know, you did everything you were supposed to. I took extra time to try to face this down. And although, you know, the results in some cases were laughable, I'm not talking about, you know, the murder of two cops, but in season 1, but I'm like, he's right there, but it does show you, you know, it's like the reactions of others. So it's interesting that, you know, and you could also see as far as, you know, sometimes parents, grandparents, family members do have this effect on, you know, other members of the family. It's a real thing. And as far as like how traumatic that can be, it's incredibly relatable. You know, just ask my grandmother. You know, it's like, and you know, there's a little bit of Edie in my grandma. But at any rate, but yeah, it's just, it's fascinating. But yeah, I would say that, you know, none of this was throwaway. And I think Gilroy's right. And I do also think that, you know, if I had a message to other Star Wars writers, you know, treat this as a master class you're getting for free. You're not having to subscribe to. I do think that, or whoever is writing, myself included, you know, there are no small roles. If you fully flesh these characters out, they will bring you flowers back home. And it's amazing. But yeah, it's interesting. I think he's incredibly relatable on some arcs, and he kind of reminds me of what Charlie, the wild card from It's Always Sunny, where it's like, I don't know what he's capable of, but he's capable of quite a lot. He's very resourceful, and I don't count him out in, you know, I don't know if he'll make it to the end of the series, but I'm not counting him out until he's down for good.
Well, yeah, and you know, I think our listeners will generally know this, but there's a term for in Dungeons and Dragons where you start metagaming, right? Where you get out of the moment and you're instead thinking about the structure of the game and guessing what your torturous DM has and involved. And I try my best to not metagame this show because I want to just chew on the moments and be in it. But when I think about kind of the long arc of Cyril, I think there is a very powerful theme to the idea that you could be a good, justice-minded person and you could be warped by the forces around you and the systems around you to do very evil. And I think that's not a message that would be inappropriate in our day and age, right? But the flip side of that is that this could also be a message about when you are a good person and you are operating within such a system, it is incumbent upon you to break that system and to get out of that system. And I think either of those could be very powerful. And I really don't know which one I'm rooting for. But I find myself, in spite of all his fascistic tendencies, rooting for Cyril. And, you know, if the last shot is him eating his cereal on a, you know, wherever the Bad Batch ended up, I forget that planet, or, you know, he's on Gleon Psalm playing the Valacord like Beckett always dreamed of. That's a great ending for that character.
I'm there for it.
I'd be satisfied.
Well, and that's why I also like it goes like, and we were on that episode of Coffee with Kenobi, you know, ranking the series and things like that. And I talked about, you know, like Sergeant Mosk, where I love the fact that, you know, he was so, you know, I'm trying to do my job. We're there. We've got it. You know, he saw that, but, you know, him having to hit the flask kind of showed you like everybody has their weaknesses. And I've always kind of found that more interesting when someone's not just showing you this front of who they are and you're just saying like, this is real. And people have there's the side people want to see. There's the Instagram all-star frame, and there's us on the sidelines going, I didn't take out the garbage when I should have, or I should have put the rice away. And there's just that the failings that we have, but it's all what makes you as a person. And I just, like I said, these characters feel fully fleshed. And I think that when you're going into a season like this, as I think in some cases, we would love to see this treatment for someone like Ahsoka season 2, where we know we're going to get more. But it's or The Mandalorian, where it's a little different, where sometimes you don't have time. There's not a lot of screen time to show us some of those other things. I think we would love to have this blueprint, this template on all these Star Wars series, where you see these great set pieces, and you see these character interactions and all this in very deep. And in some cases, you're getting a little more of, the veneer of it, but you're not really seeing maybe too much of the depth that we could all take, right? Because it's like trying to introduce somebody to Rogue One before they watch Star Wars, although they come first. It's hard because you don't really have any frame of mind. You have to kind of watch Star Wars, then Rogue One makes sense, even though one comes before the other. But in this case, you're just going to go, you know what? Andor itself is just going to be a beautiful centerpiece in the Disney Plus run of shows. I don't know if we're going to get to this level again, but I do think it's something that these other shows should try to aspire for, whether it's animated, whether it's, whether it's a Visions, whether it's that, the nuance is not unappreciated.
Yeah, I mean, we talked before about sometimes you want Domino's, and sometimes you want the gourmet, high-end, elite pizza. I love this elite pizza, this beautiful gourmet artisanal recipes, but I think it can't all be this all the time. But I think you're right that writers should take that lesson you said. And that was a really fun episode of CWK, and it brings Dan to mind, who one of the things I admire most about Dan is how much he loves writing and how much he thinks about writing as a teacher, as a writer, a published author himself, and as somebody who just loves good story and good literature. And I think, Andor stands out to me for those reasons, and that's what came out in that conversation. I was about to transition to my question, but I don't think it's my turn. I think it's over to you.
Well, I was going to say there was a lot to unpack there. One, welcome back, CWK. Welcome back, Dan. I know he took a break, and I was listening to his celebration coverage, which was great, a great way to return, and welcome back. Two, yes, Dan will not suffer bad story writing, and it makes sense. And as a fan, like I said, there's a way to have good constructive criticism, and that's the one thing that Dan teaches us, over and over. It's like, look, like it or like it matters, and it really matters. And this is like a shining example. Three, Jen, you can mark off pizza off of the Breakfast Pack's bingo card. It hasn't been filled in a while. However, five being a Chicagoland resident. No Domino's, not an option. There are plenty of good options, but I get it. I have myself gone to Little Caesars, just because it's like, it's the cheap option. I haven't done it in a while, to my credit. But there are a lot of good, but yes, pizza's pizza. Bad pizza, good pizza. It's still pizza, folks. So yes, Jen, you can mark that off your bingo card. One of these days we'll have to get the Breakfast Pack bingo card, because there are a lot of spaces on there, and we'll have to, there's a side quest. Maybe, we won't. Put it this way, in the next 100 episodes of the Breakfast Pack, which may take a little longer given the release schedule of Disney Plus, we will figure out the Breakfast Pack bingo card scenario. Maybe, and if you were out there, come up with your own suggestions for the bingo card, and we will definitely add that to the show. All right, yeah. It is my turn. Aha! You can tell we're you come back for like the second or third episode of all this when we get back into form, right before it stops. We'll be on our, we'll be a well-oiled machine by that time. All right.
Well, and I just want to acknowledge we've talked about kind of 2 of 4 plot lines. No, well, 3 of 5, but the big ones haven't been touched yet.
I know.
I don't know where you're going, but
all right. I
don't want to be here till midnight. So I suggest maybe we go.
Well, and once again, that is sort of the thing where it's like you're putting all this together. And so, yes, we try not to do those big, like 2 or 3 hour episodes, although in some cases I'll have to go to refer that just because there's so much going on here. But yes, the marriage on Chandrilla. there's a lot in there, but I am curious about your thought. I want to get your thoughts on this. Will Mon and Perrin reconcile before Perrin maybe is taken off the board? It's an interesting note from the first season, because basically Perrin comes out right away and you're like, this guy's kind of a tool. But it's going to be interesting, given what has happened in the arc of the wedding, and now knowing that she has kind of lost Tay. And they've gone through this together, because it's interesting when I hear Tay's speech to the bride and groom about all the things you're going through. I started thinking about, will they kind of, this is a little bit of a speculation, but will they kind of reconcile before something maybe happens? Because I do think that there is this, once again, there's this parallel between Team Mon and Team Cassian, where there's a lot of loss, and it's just showing you the sacrifices that they are both going to be making. Do you think they'll kind of patch things up and then boom?
I mean, Gilroy, you beast. I have not liked Perrin, period, and I really liked that toast and that speech, and it felt like Gilroy giving him his own best understanding of marriage, right? I think it's come up on the show before. Who knows? I'm a gigantic fan of the television show The Good Place, and they explain how marriage is not like being struck by lightning and finding your soulmate. It's getting up every day and making the choice to work to have a better marriage. And I've always loved that. And I felt so much of that spirit here. It's like, yeah, he's a dirtbag, but like he gets it and he finds the joy within it. And he was his most likable across these episodes, I would say, in my opinion of the character. And I think that's a really interesting question. It was striking to me how I don't know the culture of Chandrila that well, but it seemed like he was just ready to accept her adultery, right? Like, oh, I assumed that's your boyfriend. Like, it's fine. Like, we all just do whatever we want on the side of our ceremonial marriages, and kind of fits with the idea that they all get married way too young in childhood, and then, the marriages don't mean that much to them, perhaps. There's a theme across all the strands about how ritual and ceremony doesn't mean as much in a world like this, and I think that's really fascinating at looking at this. But this was my absolutely favorite plot line. I thought the Chandrila wedding knocked me out of my socks, and I thought it was incredible. I think reconciliation is on the table. If not like full romantic love again, then I think an understanding of each other and working on the same team, even if that team's not the rebellion. It might just be we're working together again. Now we're going too far. This is Breakfast After Dark all of a sudden. Like, the new Mon Mothma novel alludes to the fact that their marriage is rather loveless and that it's been a while since they spent a night together. So I feel like, and that takes place right after Revenge of the Sith. So this is a marriage that's been in trouble for a while. And that's the level we'll go to. This is a family program, but that came to mind when you asked the question. What do you think? I actually don't want to know if you think they'll get back together. I want to know if you want them to get back together.
I mean, if you think about like monologues, and one of the things we loved about Andor season 1 was everybody really got a great monologue. And here we go, Perrin getting a really great monologue. And, although, he kind of came off as, in season 1 as sort of a one note, like he doesn't really care. We're sort of like, hey, she's important. She's all this, and he could care less. It's like he just wants a good dinner. But now you see him in his element at his home, and I think you're seeing a lot more sides to him. I'm not saying he's not a tool still, but I do think that it's nice that like some of the other characters, we're getting to see a little more of this, and you're going, oh, so I think it's a little more complicated, and I like the fact that it's a little more complicated, because anybody who's been married a long time knowing it's complicated, folks. It's not just a one-trick thing, and yeah, I loved how you kind of put it. You wake up going, all right, how are we going to work together today? Because today has its own set of challenges. Not every day are you going to have, oh gosh. All right, I'm going to stop the podcast for a second, because house party droid. I've got to say that. I wanted to make sure I put that in there because I knew that Ross would lose his collective mind right after he wakes back up from catching all the sleep coming back from Celebration. But hello, house party droid. We could do a whole show on that. Anthony King, put that on the whiteboard because I want to know its name. I want to know who makes it but anyway. Yeah.
I thought of DJ Roomba. Did you watch Parks and Rec?
No.
On Parks and Rec, a character invents DJ Roomba, which is his iPod dock taped to the Roomba so that it goes through the house playing music. So I was like, they did it. We did it. DJ Roomba's real.
There we go. Just make sure it doesn't bump into the Shandy Murley and knock it down. But anyway, no, I think they will get back together. Like you said, I don't know if it'll be. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where they could really tempt us and get really close to it, and then something bad, just enough to make us feel bad about when he maybe goes. Because, like I said, I think all these set pieces, I think anybody is on the table that isn't in Rogue One. And also, I kept thinking this whole time about Mon Mothma in Rebels and how she leaves the Senate. And there's no way she's going to do that unless unless it's, the path is clear for her. And there's a lot of pieces on this table that are there. And, you can now you see her in Return of the Jedi, with that face and that look and looking like she'd been on Tatooine for 20 years. Compared to like these gorgeous outfits and so forth. But yeah, I think that Mon will experience somewhat joy before it really just takes a toll on her.
All right, and this is my sourpuss sidebar. Dave Filoni.
That wasn't sour?
No. My sourpuss sidebar is Dave Filoni. Get away from Genevieve O'Reilly. I do not want to see her come back. Her part in Ahsoka was so lame compared to how well she's been written by Tony Gilroy. I'm sorry. I'm not here for it. Like, I let Carolyn Blackistone be Mon Mothma, and we'll just pretend Ahsoka didn't happen. Genevieve O'Reilly's fantastic. She should work all the time. She should get a film franchise built around her. Get out of there. Get away from her. Don't touch her. She's in Tony's world, not yours, Mr. Filoni.
Hey, but considering how much we've known, or like now what they've said where a lot of Ahsoka Season 2 is going to be heavy Akbar, guess who's been trying to draw Akbar lately? This guy. So I'm like, yeah, give me all that. I'm like, all right, you can totally
I'll take that. We can do some good guest work on him and so on. But
let's give Tim Rose some work.
So stay away.
Leave Mon off there. She wants to walk across the background while Akbar's talking. I'm all for that. But yeah, I get it. It's sort of like, like I said, they're two different kind of series and they're written different. And I would say Ahsoka, much like The Mandalorian, much like Book of Boba Fett, they kind of feel that they're written kind of the same, where it's like they're shorter, they're more, it's like, the original Star Wars, right? You didn't get that deep in certain places. And so this is just a lot deeper. And so, there's just this very great well of it. And you're right. When you get a character that they feel out of sorts in other places where you're like, I know she's got a lot more. And they're like, where's the monologue? Anyway, but then you get Chopper. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you want?
I want Dave Filoni not to touch Mon Mothma. The memes of Will Smith. It's me punching Dave Filoni, saying, "Keep your damn hands off Mon Mothma." With all love and affection to Dave Filoni, he's done incredible things for this franchise. Stay away from Mon Mothma. First of all, one more shout out to director Bennick. Clearly my best Star Wars friend, because he and I have debriefed on these episodes all week. He sent me a YouTube video that is just 1 hour continuous of Mon Mothma dancing. And I don't need YouTube. Like, just shut it down. YouTube, we did it. That's all I'll need for the rest of my life.
Oh my God.
So definitely worth checking out. So here's my question, because I can't wait to go through each episode this summer, I hope, so we can talk about this. So we're probably going to hit this question and then maybe do one question on each of the other plot and then wrap it up. But I will say, where do you come down on, did Luthen do the right thing? Did Tay have to be taken out? or did Luthen overreact?
No, I would say that you can see Tay unraveling throughout this. And it was going back and watching it again, when I'd kind of, I know that we'd heard that he was, estranged from his wife and things like that, but going back and watching again, once again, it's really hard to go back and do these rewatches because there's so much material to go over. But then kind of like at the very beginning when he's talking about like, yes, it's been very recent, my wife and I are, not living together, that kind of thing, you start to go, but by the end, right after he's had, hey, a couple 3 days of partying, and you've got these, it's interesting because you kind of saw that, well, maybe Tay and her were destined to be a thing, but you can see it's really taken its toll. The foundation he created to kind of help hide some of her finances is working, but it's taken a toll on him. And it's kind of like you're seeing he really parallels Brasso in you having to cover up for Cassian and what happens. But yeah, I you hate to say that he probably had to go, but once again, just like with Edie Karn, these are ways to kind of finish these storylines and also bring back Vel. Hello, and you saw that. What a great payoff. We brought back not Vel, but Vel's Cinta. Wow.
Maybe you don't know this, but you alluded to Doctor Who before. Have you started the new season?
I have not.
She's the new companion. So I was like, where's the Doctor? Where's he around
right. Okay.
here? Yeah.
She looked familiar. I've seen some of the I've seen some of the promos when I'm going, okay, now it. But yeah, some of these threads have to kind of end, and this is the way they're going. But it's really fascinating. But it not only are you kind of like sending him off to his death, but you're also having Cinta kind of do it. Wow. And then Val kind of seeing it and going, what? So yeah, I think it also sets up an interesting tension between Luthen and Mon that will probably pay off later, because we all kind of think that Luthen, and we haven't talked too much about Stellan Skarsgård's performance, which was amazing, by the way. Once again, this is what happens when you throw all this stuff together. Was amazing, but I do think that, yeah, it sets them, and it sets them almost at odds, because they're just showing like the price keeps getting higher. And, it's going to take who hasn't said, you know what, it's been a rough week, I'm just downing a bunch of whatever the heck these things are, and DJ Roomba, all this. So, but yeah, what do you think?
Well, and let me just throw up, I did get my Luthen Topps Living card, a great piece of art. So I think I'm only missing Leda now, and then I have the Andor set.
I'll have to go back and find out what I have, because I have a number of those Andor Living set cards from Penix and Caballero.
Love everything you just said. It to me was a reminder that rebellions require sacrifice, and Mon had a set of sacrifices she made right away, Perrin's reputation among them, and then a set of sacrifices she didn't want to make but chose to, which would be Leda and the betrothal. And now she has found out that she made more sacrifices, and she didn't realize at the time, right? And I'm not going to get the dialogue exactly right unless I didn't check. Maybe it's in the notes from director Bennick. But there's a great moment where Mon Mothma essentially says something akin to I'm not worried about him, and Luthen spits back like, well, that must be nice, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and it's this beautiful moment to realize she is not at the level he is, and that he's going to answer that. So I thought this was stunning, because I really liked Tay in the first series. Back to your last question, I saw Tay and Mon Mothma driving off into Rebellion Land, happily married at the end of the series, right? They were going to be on the back of the bus with the as the Graduate and the Robinson daughter. I can't remember her first name, the character from The Graduate, Mrs. Robinson's daughter. So I thought that could be the ending, but I think it was the right call. I think, like you said, he got sloppier and sloppier. Doesn't have a wife, getting way too drunk. I mean, the old World War II propaganda that became a Lucasfilm motto during the sequel shooting is loose lips sink starships, right? And these were very loose lips. So stunning. The way he's just kind of carousing around the party and Luthen is stalking him like a predator and ready to just act in a moment while still keeping up his character of the affable antiques dealer. Stunning, stunning, stunning. How many times can I say stunning in these 3 episodes?
Oh man. All right. Yeah, you are right in that. I think the more questions we ask, the more things that are it's hard to touch because there's so many things that have happened. But just the end piece where she's dancing around and she's just like, this is how I'm like, it was a great stroke. And then you also see, as Cinta's kind of like taking him away and you're like, oh man. All right.
Genius.
I'm trying to think of, I'm going to come back with one last question because I think we're going to have to really, we'll defer to some of our other podcasts to go more into detail. Because another thing about it is like, trying to find the time to record all this and get through this, but try to get through some of the major set pieces. I'll say this now as sort of a question, and I'll try not to bring it up. I'll try not to allude to questions like this later, but I am curious at the end of the series, just so we can put it here now, who's still alive at the end of this series? Besides, Mon Mothma and Cassian Andor.
I was gonna say we know for sure Mon Mothma, Cassian Andor, and Krennic, who's now a part of this show. I don't feel confident about Bix surviving. I don't feel confident about Clea or Luthen surviving. One of my favorite podcasters in their preview said they thought Luthen was going to die in the first arc. So they're wrong in that regard, but it kind of makes sense that the mentor figure falls away to let the younger student shine, a la Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't feel good about Cinta or Vel. And I love all these characters. Question mark for me is Dedra and Cyril. I can see them living in that little institute that Galen's locked up at in Rogue One, right? Or something like that. They could just go so deep into the kind of ISB director Krennic world. And that might be my rundown. I think it's gonna be Rogue One style. To answer your question shortly, I think it's more Rogue One than Return of the Jedi, right? I think this is a message about how we need to sacrifice is required for this type of movement.
Yeah, I agree to that. And,
I'm not happy about it. You made me very grumpy. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Go ahead with your answer.
It is something where I just wanted to kind of get that on record before as we kind of go, because I started thinking about like, we've lost Brasso already, but I mean, we did lose him in episode 3. And so it does kind of make sense. I start to kind of go like with Bix and Will, Will's death, if it happens, it's going to be very tough. But I could see both. And as it kind of strings out, because also, Cassian, we still have yet to get to K2. And so, who's still going to be around when it's just going to be the Cassian and K2. And maybe by that time, he won't have anybody else. And it'll be interesting maybe to see how his relationship with K2, we will know what happens going into what he's probably lost already. And what he will kind of maybe put on K2, and maybe their relationship, as we already know, was pretty awesome already. But now I think there's going to be a lot more context with that. It'll be very interesting how that K2 may become a surrogate for everybody else he's lost. We've already, obviously Marva from season 1. And by the way, if you're on the run, maybe not put a pinup of Marva on your ship. That would say, like, don't say you're from Ferrix. What does that picture say, folks? Anyway, sorry, not to bring it down, because there's gonna be plenty of like YouTube comments going, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that." Anyway, laser eyes and all that. But yeah, I don't see too many making it. But it's interesting on the Imperial side of, it'll be interesting to see who from that group, how they kind of deal with that, because obviously losing anybody from the Rebellion side hurts. But what will we lose from the Imperial side, and how will we feel about their lives and their deaths? It's very interesting, and it'll be kind of fun to kind of to chart this as it goes along. Anyway, like I said, I'm starting to kind of come towards the end, so it's probably time for us to kind of start thinking about a Pringles can review of this arc. And I don't think it's as easy as throwing out a number, because I am struggling to find my Pringles can review for this, and I am kind of curious where you're going to land.
All right, so I'll answer that, but I just want to buzz through my questions just to put markers down.
Fair
I
enough.
want to ask as a theme for the rest of the series. I really enjoyed that CWK we were on, and one of the criticisms Dan had, not even a criticism, is he pointed out that this one was a show he could not watch with his son, and that detracted from it because it's a Star Wars strand that is not a family experience. And I really appreciated that thought, because that is usually what Star Wars is, and this is not.
Right.
So I want the question on the table of, this got a lot more adult, and is that okay? And how do we feel when our Star Wars gets this adult? To not make light of it at all. It brought up rape in the final episode, a threatened rape, and then the word rape, which is very serious for Star Wars. Never been said in Star Wars before, never even been implied in Star Wars before. And I think it's gonna be an interesting reaction to see how fans feel about this. And Tony Gilroy is already out there explaining why he did it, and I think his explanation makes a lot of sense to me. But it's pretty heavy. Second question I want to just put a marker down on in response to what you just said. Did Brasso deserve better? That was a trap question for you, because I was going to say, yes, Brasso did deserve better, but the point is, heroes don't always get what they deserve, right? Heroes sometimes just get one bad laser bolt, and you have to say goodbye to them. And I'm so sad to see Brasso go. He was an all-time favorite from the first season. So then I was going to just ask you the MVP, but we've already gushed about everybody. So we talk a lot about first episodes, and we talked about this a lot, how you want to kind of rate them in a place where you save room to go higher, and you think about where we've been, where we might go, all of that. You try to place that in. I think when we give our Pringles cans rating, we often try to understand in the context of this show and across all the shows as a part of like our rankings of it, right? How a Skeleton Crew episode compares to a Bad Batch episode, compares to a Light and Magic episode. Who knows? But we try to do it. So after all that preamble, I will shout out another CWK great, Tom Gross, who also reminded us you should consider the flavor of the Pringles. My friends, my top Pringle is not barbecue like Mr. Tom Gross. I remembered Tom. My top Pringle is sour cream and onion.
Ooh.
And my friends, this arc of Andor should be considered carefully. You don't want to set the bar too high for the rest of this. But my friends, this is 12 jumbo size industrial pack cans of sour cream and onion Pringles for me. I could not love this more. I will rewatch this forever. This is everything I've ever wanted from Star Wars and so much more. I don't know where they're going to go from here. I'm sure it's up, but I'm going to break my mold. I'm going to break my eBay account. 12 jumbo-sized Pringles cans. Greg, where are you at?
So we've got the Pringles coming out of the can, because normally this is a set out of 10, but we're going to go 12. And I do, on a level, I do agree with that, because I think that this is the best that Star Wars can do. And before you at me, I will say that the writing is fantastic. The characters, you kind of feel that Empire Strikes Back vibe of these are characters we're already comfortable with. We know their backstory, and they're just set in motion, and they're just going. And it's just going from one problem to another, and you just feel that tension. I did feel, you feel horrible for Bix, because you see that great little scene at the beginning where she's having that bad dream of the agent who was, torturing her from season 1 and that.
Dr. Gorst, I
Dr.
believe.
Gorst.
My
Okay.
apologies. Creating an edit moment for you. I believe is his name. But yes, fantastic.
But on the other hand, I do agree that I think this series is just getting started. And I'm comfortable. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm comfortable going, like, I'm not going to put myself, because I think there is even better to come. So I'm going to start off with just my casual 8, because 8 is good. 8 is real good. But
got a lot of students wanting an 8 out of 10 right now. I'll tell you that. An 80% would sound awfully good to my students at the end of the semester.
But I will say that I think there are some better things to come, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you take 2 off the board for things they didn't do. But I would say maybe one of them maybe I will say is fair enough, of having to consume all these at once, because I do think that there was a communal loss by having it put together like this. Not that we're not used to. I think you brought up a very good point of where Andor season 1, we did watch the first 3, but there is a loss, I think, that I feel from not having everybody be able to enjoy it all at once. Some people have to smartly, consume it over a number of days, and there are worry about spoilers. Can you imagine had you been spoiled of Brasso's death before you saw it? I would have been super upset. So I would say that in some cases I might knock off a little bit, because I enjoy it more when everybody got to see it at the same time. So I would say that I think that there's more for them. I think it's just going to get better. This was incredible television. It was worth the wait. I'm going to be very sad that it's going to go through so fast, and we're going to be like, oh. But I do like the fact that we can go back later and talk about it and go into a little more nuance, just like the story does. So, all right, I like that as well. I don't know if I have a flavor so much, because I would say more of a barbecue fan, but I would say I enjoy a good sour cream and onion chip. So I'm going to say, I would say there's a fine line between sour cream and onion and dill. Not a fan. Don't at me.
I hear that.
All right. So in the meantime, we're going to be back for the second arc at some point. We've got a lot.
Basically tomorrow, probably, but yeah.
But yeah, it does sort of show you that this series is going to go nuts, and we're coming towards the end of the school year. A lot of things going on. I'll be taking another little mini trip, and so it's just going to be. And then of course May the 4th. So there's all this kind of stuff, and then, like I said, I'm glad
with a whole other show on May the 4th coming out. Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but it's crazy the times we're living in.
No, so I mean, we need Dan back. We need CWK back like he is, because we're going to have to listen to a lot of other folks go over all the stuff we missed. And even in talking to, Ross Holliman, friend of the show, who we're going to hear a little bit more on our May the 4th program, talk about his Star Wars Celebration, experience. And then, everything, listening to Anthony on Force Ghost Conversations talk about the Celebration wrap. We had Mary Purdue and Anthony both on to talk about all the stuff we missed. There is so much stuff that's happening right now that, it's very hard to kind of break this down, but I think we could probably take the rest of the year going through this. But anyway, in the meantime, so I can let you go so we can get amped for whatever's coming next, where can people find you, my friend?
Gosh, I don't even know where I am these days. Mainly in the theater, seeing
That's fair.
Revenge of the Sith. But people can find me online on Instagram and Letterboxd, primarily at Ion Cannon, EYEONCANON. I love being on this show, and I love that we've banked 100 of these. That's still insane to me, not to lose the spirit of the opening of the episode. And I also really enjoy being on Long Take Review, where we just banked an episode called our Hype Draft, which if you've never given us a try because you maybe don't see movies as fast as we do, pop on that episode, because we're looking forward to the rest of the year and what's coming out for summer blockbusters and fall festival movies and Oscar contenders, and had a really fun conversation, kind of being optimistic and hopeful. It looks like a great year ahead, so people should check that episode out. And we have a Sinners review about to drop, which is burning up the box office.
My son saw that over there. Well, I was seeing Revenge of the Sith.
So good.
Him and his girlfriend saw Sinners. So.
And we also recently finally got to Captain America, formerly me ranting on this show, but Jen found time to get me on that and a couple others. And we're headed into Mission Impossible. We're headed into How to Train Your Dragon. We're headed into Jurassic World and Fantastic Four. It's a big summer. So check us out. That's called The Long Take Review. And I do a podcast on the Wheel of Time too, but look, only go for 2. If you're listening to me 3 times a week, what are you doing? Get out there, touch grass. But thank you so much, Greg. Celebrating. I wish we could cheers to 100 episodes.
Oh, by the way, and also in the show notes, I'm going to make a shout out to Ben Brophy at Zen Kenobi for not only a great Google Doc, but also a great T Public store where some proceeds can go off and do some good things. So definitely check it out. I'll leave that link in the show notes as well. If you have questions for the Breakfast Pack, you can ask on the socials at X, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and Blue Sky at Rebel Base Card. Oh, by the way, shout out to a Bruce Smith who sent a very nice long email that I need to respond to, but it has been really crazy. So I want to say thank you for emailing the show, and that was a really great set of questions that I'm going to have to go over. I might even have to make an episode on it because there was so many really great questions. But email the show at greg@rebelbasecard.com. All right. I'd like to go on, but I see my wife and my daughter are coming back from a barbecue. And would cause a couple more edits to the program. So in order to get out, and once again, just thank you for everybody who has downloaded the program and that's going to be with us on this journey, because Andor is going to be a little different for us. But with 100 breakfast packs, we will make it work. And so if we didn't necessarily cover everything that you were interested in, that's once again a point where you can write us in those comments and questions. But also, we will be coming back in the summer and going back and doing a little deeper dive into it. All right. Until then, for Greg Cass, my name is Greg McLaughlin. We're going to return you to your podcast playlist already in progress.
This podcast is not affiliated in any way with Topps, Disney, or Star Wars, nor is it endorsed by Disney or Lucasfilm, and is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All names and sounds and any other related items are properties of their respective trademarks and or copyright holders here in the U.S. and abroad. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com.
That's it.